Oh, hey there! I was just tending my garden. You know, taking care of plants in a garden is a lot like taking care of trees in a forest. They may be on very different scales, but both start with a good plan. For my garden, I made sure to prep the soil well and plant a variety of food and flowers to fend off diseases and pests. When the plants were small, I fenced them in to give them extra protection from animals that might find them tasty to eat. As they grew, I took out the plants that weren't growing as well and periodically weeded, so what was left had plenty of room to mature. And now that winter is coming, my plants are mature, and I need food to eat. I can finally harvest these carrots. But I think I'll leave the flowers here since I don't need them in my home. Since forests are far larger and more complex than gardens, making a plan to take care of a forest can get pretty complicated. Thankfully, many people throughout the centuries recognized the importance of this topic and have done lots of research to develop best practices and strategies for forest management. This research has led to the field of silviculture.
A New Jersey Forest Service pocket presentation.
Hi, my name is Courtney. I'm a forester with the New Jersey Forest Service, and today we're going to answer the question, what is silviculture? According to the Society of American Foresters, the technical definition of silviculture is the art and science of producing and tending forest stands by applying scientifically acquired knowledge to control forest stand establishment, composition, growth, health, and quality. But what exactly does that mean? Well, first, forest stands are communities or groups of trees growing at a particular place and of similar characteristics that foresters can collectively manage as a single unit. Establishment refers to how and where the forest gets started. Composition is the variety and location of species within a stand. And growth, health, and quality describe how well the forest responds to the challenges it faces as it grows. As the definition suggests, silviculture is both an art and science because lots of research has been done to establish silvicultural methods, but it's important to note that silviculture isn't just a recipe that you follow. Not all silvicultural practices are appropriate to implement in all forest types or in all areas. Here in New Jersey, you may utilize some of the techniques we're about to teach you, but not all of them. Determining where and when these techniques are appropriate is the role of trained foresters who consider the ecology of an area, feasibility, and the values and goals of the landowner, which, for state-owned land, is the public. That's why good silviculture involves some serious, deliberative, and thoughtful problem solving. That's where the art comes in. This means that silvicultural planning and management revolve around two very important questions. What do I want this forest to look like, and how am I going to get it there? Ultimately, when practicing silviculture, these questions should always aim to meet the values of people and society without ever creating irreversible impacts. In order to start thinking about these questions, we'll need to walk you through some of the basics: forest structure and composition, forest age, and the site conditions under which trees can thrive, followed by the three components of silviculture: regeneration, tending, and harvesting. Crown class is a measurement of competition among similar trees within a stand. Collecting crown class data can tell us a lot about what stage of stand development a forest is in and helps to guide management practices. Height growth is one of the most critical factors of competition. Trees that can grow the most rapidly in height are almost always the largest trees in all dimensions, including diameter and crown. As weaker trees are crowded out by their more successful neighbors, their crowns become misshapen and restricted in size. Unless a disturbance occurs that opens up a gap in the forest canopy, the suppressed trees eventually become overtopped and ultimately die. We recognized 4 distinct crown classes that are pictured here: dominant, codominant, intermediate, and suppressed. Dominant trees are generally taller than the average crown height and receive full light from above and some light on their sides. Codominant trees make up the general level of the forest canopy and are a bit shorter than dominant trees, receiving full light from above. Intermediate tree crowns are generally narrow and or one-sided, and are shorter than the dominant and codominant trees, but extend a little bit into the forest canopy. Suppressed trees have crowns below the forest canopy and receive no direct sunlight. Crowns on these trees are generally short, sparse, and narrow. In silviculture, many of our planned objectives revolve around cutting or leaving specific crown classes in the forest to accomplish a variety of goals. For example, we might remove suppressed and intermediate trees to increase growing space for dominant and codominant trees. Speaking of suppressed trees, just because a tree is below the main forest canopy doesn't always mean that it's suppressed. Tree species can be shade tolerant or shade intolerant. Shade intolerant trees require full sun conditions to grow and thrive. Species like pitch pine, tulip poplar, black cherry, and some oaks germinate and grow best when they have access to a lot of growing space under full sunlight. We can create these conditions using silvicultural treatments like clear cuts and seed tree operations, which we'll explain in more detail later in the presentation. Other species like American holly, sugar maple, eastern hemlock, or American beech are shade tolerant, meaning they thrive in or outcompete other species in shaded conditions for germination and growth. These species will often germinate and grow underneath an already established forest canopy. As forest canopy trees die and fall, more mature, shade-tolerant species can replace them in the canopy. We can create growing conditions for shade-tolerant species through treatments such as patch cuts or group selection, and single tree selection, which we'll also discuss in more detail later in the presentation. There are 3 distinct silvicultural systems with specific sets of silvicultural treatments which create and manage different age structures. These are known as even-aged, two-aged, and uneven-aged systems. In even-aged stands, tree species are generally shade intolerant and all regenerate at about the same age, so they appear quite similar in size, structure, and character. Trees aged within plus or minus 20 years of each other are normally considered in the same age class, and anything greater or less than that would generally be considered a separate age class. Two-aged stands represent an intermediate category where there are 2 distinct age classes. In these instances, a new age class often starts beneath an older one, allowing the younger one to establish and continue development. This age structure can be made up of a mixture of shade-tolerant and shade-intolerant species. Uneven-aged stands contain 3 or more age classes intermingled in the same area. The trees in these stands usually range from having intermediate shade tolerance to being fully shade tolerant. This system is generally associated with more mature or mature-looking forests with significant diversity of structure, both vertically and horizontally. The first of 3 components of silviculture that we'll discuss today is regeneration. Regeneration is a procedure by which a forest stand is established or renewed. It is the act of replacing old or mature trees and the new growth that develops. Regeneration can occur naturally or artificially by the planting and or seeding of trees. Regardless of how regeneration is established, successful regeneration of any kind can only occur with the right amount of vacant growing space and the right site conditions, which can include proper soil characteristics like temperature, moisture, texture, quality, and amount of nutrients. As we mentioned earlier, the size of canopy openings and associated light filtering to the forest floor plays an important role in what kind of species we'll see regenerate in a specific area. More importantly, the ideal objective for regeneration is to create vacant growing space in conditions that are favorable for the growth of new trees. This can also mean tree species that are more desirable than others. Most times, this silvicultural component directly correlates with that of harvesting, a tool for establishing regeneration. There are two overarching methods by which trees can regenerate, naturally or artificially. All plants have the ability to regenerate naturally, most of them from the production of seeds, like acorns, walnuts, samaras from maple trees, lovingly referred to as helicopters by most kids, or spiky balls containing seeds from sweet gum trees. Seeds are most often dispersed via wind, wildlife, a lot of times poop, yuck, water, and sometimes fire. In order for natural regeneration by seed to be successful, the existing trees on a site must produce abundant amounts of viable seeds. The soil conditions must enable storage of seeds, also known as a seed bank, and environmental conditions must foster seed germination, seedling survival, and growth of the new trees. But seeds are not the only way that trees can reproduce naturally. Some tree species are excellent sprouters. When these trees, like oaks or pitch pines, are damaged, their stumps will sprout many new shoots that can grow into a group of trees. If you've ever seen a tree with multiple stems growing out of a single base, that tree was probably damaged at some point and sprouted back up with multiple stems. Some trees, like beech, aspen, or the invasive tree of heaven, have suckering roots that enable them to regenerate in a non-conventional way. These species can regenerate by growing new shoots or root suckers along their lateral root systems. This method of regeneration results in many genetically identical trees, also known as clones.
A good example of this is an aspen clone named Pando that is located in central Utah on the Fish Lake National Forest, which is made up of more than 40,000 individual root suckers and is thought to be the largest, most dense organism ever found at a whopping 13 million pounds.
From a silvicultural perspective, if your stand already has a viable seed source and adequate growing conditions, natural regeneration is less ecologically intensive and more cost-effective than artificial regeneration, and can be encouraged by mimicking natural stand disturbances.
For example, we can take advantage of advanced regeneration, which refers to abundant and well-distributed regenerating tree seedlings that are already present within a stand.
The primary goal is to make sure that this occurs in a reasonable amount of time and in reasonable numbers. If natural regeneration is not occurring within a predetermined amount of time, other undesirable species, such as non-native invasives or very competitive shrubs, may begin to colonize the site. If this happens, we may adapt our management to include artificial regeneration. Artificial regeneration through planting or seeding can be used in adaptive management, but can also be used as a primary management strategy when we know that natural regeneration alone cannot support our project goals. Reasons we would use artificial regeneration as a primary strategy include insufficient seed source, introduction or prioritization of new species, inappropriate conditions for desirable species, active control of tree stocking, or limiting time and duration of tree establishment. Artificial regeneration can be time and cost prohibitive, but is a necessary tool to have in our toolbox. In some instances, we can combine both methods of natural and artificial regeneration in a single project. For example, this stand of Atlantic white cedar was regenerated using both natural and artificial methods. This side of the road was regenerated naturally by nearby parent trees that were able to disperse seeds. The other side of the road was regenerated artificially by planting as the seed source did not reach this side of the road. Once a site has adequate regeneration and growth, we can start considering the second component of silviculture, tending, or intermediate treatments. These operations are conducted to improve the existing stand and regulate its growth without any effort directed at regeneration. These operations increase stand health and resilience by reducing crowding among individual trees and giving the remaining trees enough light and growing space. Whether your end goal is mature forest, wildlife habitat, or timber production, intermediate tending is an important step in the silvicultural process. There are a large variety of tending operations used in silviculture, and we'll cover a few of them in the next slides. A cleaning operation removes undesirable saplings to reduce competition and regulate the composition of mixed species stands. This allows the best saplings of preferred species to grow without being overtopped by competitors. Trees chosen for elimination are often unhealthy, while the trees left are the best of the best, which we refer to as the crop trees. While cleaning takes place in the early stages of tree growth, weeding is the removal of plants to alter the composition of a stand regardless of crown class to favor certain species. This can be accomplished at any growth stage, young, middle-aged, or mature. Liberation is the release of young sapling stands from the competition of older, overtopping trees. In this type of treatment, older, larger trees are removed or killed in place to open up the canopy and allow the young saplings to grow under full sunlight. Removed trees are those that were present on site long before the natural or artificial growth of the younger age class. Liberation treatments can be implemented by cutting trees, girdling them, or through chemical treatments. Thinning operations remove some trees to regulate the distribution of growing space and resources for the benefit of the residual trees. These operations serve to concentrate growth on a limited number of selected trees in the stand, yet do not vacate enough space within a forested stand to initiate regeneration of new trees. This results in an increase of the health, utility, and value of the remaining trees due to more rapid growth and resource allocation, and subsequently increased carbon sequestration rates. There are many different types of thinning operations that all differ in intensity and objectives. These include low and from below thinning, free thinning, crown thinning, selection thinning, and geometric thinning. Low and from below, or low thinnings, only remove the shortest suppressed trees within an even-age stand, mimicking the natural mortality of self-thinning during normal stand development, but at an accelerated rate. This type of thinning favors the crown classes of codominant and dominant trees, and generally removes all suppressed and or intermediate trees from a stand. These removed trees are often small in diameter, with misshapen or deformed crowns, and are the least likely to survive to healthy levels of maturity or to be marketable. In New Jersey, we often use low and from below thinning as a way to mitigate wildfire risk.
Suppressed and intermediate trees can serve as ladder fuels in our forests, helping to carry potential wildfires from the forest floor up into the main forest canopy.
By removing these fuels, we can better mitigate the risk of a wildfire jumping into the forest canopy. Low and from below thinnings are also a great tool for adjusting tree density to more healthy and manageable numbers in stands where fire has been excluded from the system for many years. These thinnings can also become more impactful when used in conjunction with prescribed burning treatments. Trees cut in this type of thinning are generally left on the forest floor within the site because of their low marketability. Crop tree release or free thinning treatments concentrate growth on a select number of the healthiest trees within a stand with dominant or codominant crowns. These treatments generally involve the removal or killing of undesirable trees with crowns touching or directly adjacent to crop trees on one or more sides, freeing the crown. This treatment does not remove those trees which are non-competing and of lowest crown classes, only those directly competing with crop trees. This method helps alleviate any burdensome costs of tree removal while directly impacting diameter growth and health of the remaining trees. Crown thinning is a method by which trees are removed from the upper crown classes in order to open up the forest canopy and favor the development of the most promising trees of these same classes, generally at some desired spacing interval. Normally done as a series of removals, most of the trees that are harvested come from the codominant class, but any intermediate or dominant trees interfering with the development of potential crop trees are also removed. Crown thinning favors nearly the same kinds of residual trees that low and from below thinning does, but is focused on removing a few strong competitors instead of on wholesale elimination of the smallest, weakest trees.
In this type of thinning, lower canopy trees, such as intermediate or suppressed trees, are left on site to restrict epicormic branching on crop trees, which can occur when dormant buds on the stems or branches of trees grow into shoots as a result of increased light levels or fire. This type of thinning also restricts the development of unwanted understory vegetation while maintaining a vertical distribution of foliage within the stand that can be beneficial as wildlife habitat.
In a situation where your dominant and codominant trees are predominantly poorly formed or unhealthy, you could utilize selection thinning to remove those trees to favor healthier trees in the lower crown classes, enhancing the quality of the stand. This generally can result in more scattered harvesting patterns or in aggregations of trees. As this type of thinning is designed to improve the quality of crop trees, it is beneficial to implement it as soon as possible in the life of the stand. Once crop trees approach healthy and dominant positions in the stand, other types of thinning can be utilized for stand improvement. However, it is very important to know that if this practice is done incorrectly, it can be viewed as high grading, which is a destructive practice that harvests the best trees and leaves the poorest quality trees with every entry to the stand. High grading can actually change the genetic makeup of a stand of trees in addition to contributing to poor future growth potential. Row thinning, also referred to as geometric or mechanical thinning, is a method of cutting or keeping residual trees on a set spacing or geometric pattern without necessarily worrying about their position within the forest canopy. This method is primarily used in plantation management, but can also be used to more effectively thin very dense young stands that have not been thinned before or that have not yet demonstrated differences in height or crown class. This type of thinning is usually considered pre-commercial, and the material is not marketable. The third and final component of silviculture we'll discuss here today is harvesting. Harvesting and logging are generally used synonymously and encompass a wide variety of operations, from cutting to extraction. Extraction is the transportation of logs, which includes skidding, forwarding, loading, trucking, and or on-site processing of trees. While harvesting is a widely used term, its complexities vary from operation to operation. As part of the harvesting process, trees can be processed into a variety of sustainable, renewable forest products, many of which you might be familiar with, like lumber for the structure of your home, furniture, toilet paper, toothpaste, clothing, and mulch. The terms of cutting, clear cut, and deforestation are commonly misused to represent some components of the harvesting process. We'll discuss some of these things in more detail in a few minutes, but first, let's begin by looking at several different methods, other than tending, that are primarily associated with harvesting.
A traditional seed tree harvest is a two-step process. In step 1, called the seed cut, most of the stand is removed to establish a new age class of trees or advance regeneration.
During this type of harvest, a small number of healthy, dominant, parent or seed trees are left behind to provide seed dispersal for new trees to establish. This allows preparation of a seedbed with ample sunlight, growing space, and resources for the new stand of trees to proliferate. After the new age class has been established, we begin step 2, or the removal cut, which is a subsequent re-entry for the removal of the remaining seed trees. This harvest method is used for even-age silvicultural systems, with tree species that are primarily shade intolerant. Seed tree harvests can also be modified in various ways depending on a landowner's objectives. One common example is a seed tree with reserves, where the residual trees are retained to create a two-aged silvicultural system. The traditional shelterwood harvest method is similar to a seed tree, yet differs in the amount of residual trees left on site and for what reason. In a shelterwood harvest, more of the parent or seed trees from the main forest canopy are left on site to provide partial shelter or shading for more shade-tolerant tree species or species that require increased soil moisture. Sometimes shelterwood harvests also differ from a seed tree in that they may have a preparatory cut occur before the seed cut and removal cut to better establish a new age class before significant parent tree removal and forest canopy opening. Again, this harvest method can also be modified in several ways. A shelterwood with reserves retains the seed trees left as residuals, creating a two-aged silvicultural system, which could have significant benefits for wildlife habitat or to increase structural diversity. The clear-cut harvest method tends to be the most misconstrued method for regenerating an even-aged silvicultural system. This method purposefully removes an entire stand of trees in one entry with the sole intention of regenerating a completely new age class of shade-intolerant species. This method is also used to emulate naturally occurring stand-replacing events such as wildfires and hurricanes, which many species have adapted to. This harvest method depends heavily on well-supplied seed banks, efficient seed dispersal during the tree removal and transport process, as well as dispersal via wind, water, or animals. This method gets confused with development-related land clearing activities as well as deforestation. While deforestation and development activities do not have intentions of keeping a forested stand as forest, the main objective of silvicultural clear-cuts is to regenerate a new even-aged forest. The selection harvest method is employed for uneven-aged silvicultural systems. This method can be implemented on an individual tree basis called single tree selection, or by removing groups of trees from a stand called group selection across a cutting period. Generally, multiple periods of cutting or cutting cycles will occur every 10 to 20 years across a large time span, like 100 years. The selection harvest method inherently accomplishes regeneration, tending, and harvesting simultaneously. This method is primarily used for shade-tolerant species, such as sugar maple, beech, and birch. Selection harvesting establishes and maintains multiple age classes and therefore multiple forest canopy layers, creating a very structurally diverse forest, which can be beneficial for both wildlife and biodiversity. Salvage harvesting, an improvement or sanitation harvesting, remove dead, damaged, diseased, or dying trees to recover the value of those trees which could otherwise be left on the forest floor or become hazardous to the stand. These methods are primarily used after catastrophic events have caused widespread tree death, such as insect and disease outbreaks, windstorms, and wildfire. The primary objective of improvement or sanitation harvesting is to improve the health of a stand by removing susceptible, host, or infested trees to prevent the further spread of insects or diseases. We've now covered the three main components of silviculture. Regeneration, tending, and harvesting are all cyclical, with each component directly linking to another. But this cycle isn't always cut and dry. The steps that we take when implementing these components are heavily based off our project goals and the timeline for those goals.
For example, any of these three components can be implemented on their own or in conjunction with the other two steps. Tending or harvesting do not have to be done depending on the management goals set for the stand, and the cycle can be exited at any time, leaving a forest to grow unmanaged.
In silviculture, we are always ultimately looking to keep forests as forests by ensuring that tending and harvesting are done sustainably and that regeneration always follows. There are practices that fall outside of the three main components of silviculture that can also be helpful to achieving management goals. One of these broad practices is called site preparation and is primarily applied to the regeneration component of silviculture to help create adequate growing conditions. These treatments prepare or make a stand suitable to better establish natural or planted regeneration and include methods applied to ground or understory vegetation, the forest floor, or the soil. These treatments can include the spreading or disposal of logging slash, which is the unharvested portion of the tree and logging debris, like sections of stems, tree tops, branches, leaves, bark, and sometimes roots. Site preparation also includes methods to improve the conditions of a stand or to treat and remove species of vegetation competing with tree regeneration. Some of these examples, which we'll discuss in a few minutes, include prescribed burning, various mechanical treatments, herbicide, fertilization, and drainage or irrigation. Site preparation methods involving logging slash are employed for a variety of reasons: to mitigate any wildfire fuel hazards, to reduce or improve light and moisture conditions of the forest floor, to enhance the ability to operate machinery throughout the stand for planting or seeding purposes, or to reduce animal browse. Here in New Jersey, we keep logging slash to a height of less than 3 feet above the forest floor to help reduce the possibility of a stand catching fire and spreading quickly, especially in the southern pine barrens or pinelands region of the state. Other ways to reduce or remove logging slash for fuel reduction purposes include pile burning, chipping, and masticating or shredding of the slash. The amount and size of slash can also have different effects on a stand. For some species, negative impacts include shading, which can impede the ability of seedlings to grow. In contrast, other species benefit from shade and increased moisture, as well as the physical cover that provides short-term protection from animals. One interesting example of how slash can be used to protect seedlings from animals is slash walls, which are a new method developed by Cornell University's Cooperative Extension foresters to help exclude deer from munching on new seedlings by building a literal wall of slash that borders entire stands to keep deer out. Methods of site preparation involving prescribed burning, mechanical manipulation, and herbicide application can be done for many of the same reasons as slash management. However, these methods are generally used when working with slash is infeasible or not cost-effective. Prescribed burning can be applied to a stand to treat the forest floor by eliminating or reducing the amount of organic matter or fuels, to remove competing species of vegetation, to interrupt vertical plant structure, or to prepare a seedbed with nutrient-rich ash. Mechanical site preparation treatments primarily reduce undesired vegetation and roots from growing by uprooting, chopping, plowing, or disturbing the soil. This recycles nutrients back into the forest floor, exposes mineral soil, and can also reshape the soil surface or loosen compacted soils. This type of mechanical site preparation is commonly referred to as scarification and includes methods such as drum chopping, root raking, or disking with various types of custom forestry equipment. Herbicide application as a site preparation treatment is used to kill or control plants. It can be selective, which means it's targeted to certain species or types of vegetation, or non-selective, where it can control a broad range of species. Herbicides can also be used during different parts of a plant's life cycle, on different portions of the plant, or at different times of the year, all with different effects. The last set of site preparation methods we'll talk about today involve improving site conditions in terms of nutrients and soil protection. These treatments tend to be very costly and intensive, and are not very common, but are sometimes needed due to improper pest management practices or significant disturbances that have affected natural stand fertility or soil conditions in some way. These site preparation activities can include the application of fertilizer with nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, or calcium.
Soil protection activities that reduce the potential of erosion across the stand include the construction of physical or vegetative elements that stabilize soil movement, such as hedgerows, windbreaks, and ditches.
These soil protection activities are often a component of best management practices, which are implemented during the harvesting process to maintain and protect water resources. As defined by the EPA's Clean Water Act in 1987, best management practices, or BMPs, are any methods, measures, or practices used to protect, maintain, or preserve water quality. These practices are used during silvicultural activities to abide by specific New Jersey Freshwater Wetlands Protection Act standards, not only to protect surface waterways, but also forested wetland areas by regulating and maintaining water temperature and shading. These practices should be the most effective technologically, economically, and environmentally, and are applied before, during, or after any forestry activities. Some BMPs relate directly to harvesting methods, while others apply more generally to forestry activities. The main objective of BMPs is to keep soils and water safe and intact while carrying out silvicultural treatments. Remember, forest management should have no irreversible impacts. Now that we've covered most of the overarching components and methods of silviculture and how it deals with individual trees and stands for application, let's circle back around to what do I want my forest to look like and how am I going to get it there? A forest is a collection of stands administered as an integrated or working unit. Collectively talking about a forest at a larger scale from trees and stands allows a variety of ecological objectives to work mutually toward larger goals. Young stands, older stands, even-age stands, and uneven-age stands, all forming a diverse, resilient, and unique forest. Forest management, then, is the biological and ecological concerns of silviculture with policy, law, business, and finance. The role of a forester is to consider all the aspects of forest management as they relate to a specific forest stand. To do that, we must collect and analyze data on that stand and create a plan that incorporates silviculture techniques that are appropriate to that site. These concepts of forest management can then be expanded to meet the goals and objectives of even larger ecosystems and landscapes and over long time horizons, like 100 years or more. If you're interested in learning more about forest management priorities in New Jersey, such as mitigating climate change, wildlife habitat, recreation, and safety, please check out another one of our pocket presentations, Why Manage a Forest. So now that you know how silviculture works and how it relates to larger forests and goals, what do you want your forest to look like, and how are you going to get it there? Guess what? We can help. Ask a forester. Thank you for joining us today for a brief overview of the field of silviculture. If you have any questions or want to learn more about how we employ silviculture practices here in New Jersey, please feel free to reach out to us at askaforester@dep.nj.gov. And stay tuned for some other pocket presentations.